All right. We're starting here. Sorry. And we're going to go. My tag was out. Look at that. Look at my morning eyes. And with light, you can actually see my eyes over here. But I have to start here because I wasn't quite ready yet. I decided to feed my ginger bug. So I'm grating ginger. If you can hear my grating on my microplane. And then a little bit, we're going to get into this because I'm excited about it. I feel like I don't know why. Why am I excited about it? It's like, there is a little bit of I don't think it's the culty aspect. It's just the new, and it's kind of a special aspect of any kind of emergent community. And, so I was watching, I put it in the description. I was watching PVK's conversation with, I don't know the guy's name. It's called the Protestant Megachurch. He's wearing a fully buttoned up denim shirt and a baseball cap. Rocking it hard. And it's in the members only section right now. But the inspiration for this was that video. And PVK mentioned, he was talking about Mark Parker. So Mark, if you're out there, you can come and play. I don't get to hang out with you that much anymore because you're doing your own thing now. You're a content creator. You're not just, dude, Donnie, I would love to talk to you, dude. But yes, your nephew's, I'm guessing bar mitzvah. Is nar mitzvah that must be a typo. That's not some super special Jewish thing that I'm not aware of. What up, Benoit? And so, okay, just a second. I'm gonna be running around a little bit. This is a little bit of the look into like, I'm doing all right, man. I'm a little sick, or allergies or something. This is a little bit of a look into what I used to do in the Discord and like the open studio back in the COVID days. I'd be cooking or doing food prep or something like that because I do most of the cooking in my family. And I would just set up shop here and I would cook and do things. And it's summer now, so I would mainly wear old like V-neck undershirts because I'm a big fan of undershirts. And Andrew with the bangs. This is how deep in the corner. How deep is your corner knowledge? How deep is your love? How deep is your love? But then I would run around and leave, and then come back. One Greek cloak yesterday, Stone Age. I don't know what you're talking about. Been long. Oh, Moo, I'm streaming, so don't come over here. Sorry. All right, I did not expect my daughter to wake up yet. It's a Saturday, and it's after school. I expect her to be sleeping longer. So might have to even rearrange this more. What was I just talking about? Oh, Andrew with the bangs. So like that's how deep is your love? How deep is your knowledge? I think I was singing a BB Mac version of that song. But yeah, how deep is your knowledge of the TLC? This is part of the whole thing I'm going on. So anyhow, we used to do those around COVID. I would have an open studio. Lots of people would have open studio. I think that was actually a PBK. I think that was a PBK idea to do the open studio in Discord. And people would just come on because a lot of people were home and hang out. The whole idea of the open studio wasn't to come in particularly to talk. It was to come on, to be virtually not alone, Grim Grizz, have your screen on, chat about things, and be virtually not alone. Let's pull out the big boy. What up, William? Here's the big boy. I'm going to do some stirring, and then we can talk. And then I'll get my regular setup, and this will be more normal. So this is kind of like the open studio. mentioned Andrew with the bangs, but like Andrea, see that we've had people that have come and gone. Who was I just thinking about the other day? Jess Proviance, our TLC Job scholar, they had started a show. There was a lot of shows that started and then stopped that were going to be like a regular part of the 24/7 Jacob Federecci dream of having a TLC TBN, essentially, which is like a Turner Broadcast. No, it's not Turner Broadcast Network. That's, anyhow, like the American televangelist religious broadcasting network. You know what I'm talking about? And Jacob wanted to do that with TLC. And one of the shows was Salty and Fresh with Topher, who I think fixed speakers. He was a Canadian dude, but like he's gone. He's not around anymore. Doesn't participate in TLC at all, as far as I know. Which is sad because Topher was awesome. I really like Topher. Or like Andrew with the bangs. She doesn't really do any TLC stuff at all anymore. I think she's still running her own channel. But this is the thing, like there's only so many things you can pay attention to. And if you're not actively participating in TLC within the kind of standard hierarchy, like the first one for me is PVK. The start with PVK. I don't know if it will end with PVK, but when PVK makes a video, I watch it. It's homeroom. PVK is the most super salient. He has the most relevance realization for me. I watch PVK stuff the most and the most consistently. And then after that, it's the other people in the flotilla, and everybody has their own hierarchies, I suppose, what they pay attention to. Pause. So back to the referent video, the PVK homeroom that's not released yet because it's members only. But so this cat, which I don't know what his name is. He okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. So PVK mentioned Mark Parker, and he said, and this was the moment of inspiration. And he said, these are handy in a kitchen too, these little jar openers. One more thing, I got to clean up my counter. This is extra. Actually, I'll show you this. This is my granite cutting board. Look at it. That's extra for my shower. I got some pieces of granite for my shower project, and this was a little bit of an extra thing that they cut out for me so that I could have a granite cutting board, because I think you should really only have like wood or stainless steel cutting boards. Plastic cutting boards are of the devil. You shouldn't be eating plastic, and microplastics are bad, so you shouldn't have them. All right, we're almost ready. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, we're gonna move back. Here we go. Moving back. Moving. It's like a vlog or something. Okay, we're back. We're back to the regular place, the setup. Here we go. Let's get up here. So, PVK mentioned Mark Parker. And he's like, okay, you're going to have to tell me, what did he say? This is like at 117:48 in the thing. I don't want to play it. I would maybe play a little bit. PVK probably wouldn't care, but I don't know if they're ever going to release it, because sometimes randos don't get released for many reasons. But this guy, he said, okay, I know who some of these people are, but you'll have to tell me who some of these people are. And I thought, ooh, that's a perfect example. It's a perfect example of, what up, Nathan, of the little corner and modes of initiation. Like I put a comment in there, what my comment said, or no, it was Grail Country. He mentioned Grail Country. I'll show you that. Here, we can show you that. I'll share the screen. So here's the video. And so, whatever. If I didn't mention you, I'm sorry. As usual. Okay, I think it'll show everything. When he said he didn't know of Grail Country, I knew that he cannot really understand TLC. There are levels of knowing as you are known. Proper knowledge via relational initiation. Because that's my riff on Paul in 1 Corinthians 8. and pretty much all of 1 Corinthians, but like proper knowledge, because he says knowledge puffs up, knowledge makes proud, makes arrogant, but love edifies, love builds up. If anyone thinks he knows, he does not yet know as he ought to know. This is the information ecology. This is knowledge as objects of information. And that's not true knowledge. And this is why people somewhat don't understand, I think, even consciousness and thinking and AI, because they think it's a quantitative thing and it's a qualitative thing. Ooh, there's somebody running outside. Outside my front, I have a big window that I just look out, and there's often people running, and it makes me happy. And I think I should go on a run today because I wasn't able to yesterday because I was doing a bunch of other stuff. But it's also help for blood circulation and lungs. And even if you're sick, like unless you're really sick, that's where you gotta listen to your body. You know, if you're really sick, you should rest. But if you're this kind of sick, work it out. Get some blood flow. You know. Okay, and I said I'm not saying this is a pejorative because it just is what it is. It's inevitable. Like you don't understand something until you're initiated in it. I think that's that's almost like a what's the word? Nathan, you're a philosophy person. You're here. It's like just an axiomatic truth. It's just like it's a given. And I said levels of knowing. And I said, I can almost bet he's heard of Grim, Grizz, and Chad because those are the most often mentioned by PVK. Then maybe Sam because of wide-ranging intellectual credibility, respect, or Kale. Then maybe Grail Country and me. Seabax, Mark D. Parker, and this is going to vary for everyone. Everybody's going to have their different people, how they came in the TLC, who they know, who they interact with, blah, 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 blah. But my main point, okay, close out of this. Sorry, I think I showed a little bit of the thing. You know, Friday Morning Nameless. I didn't mention Neil, and Neil is here. But you come along. You're part of the package of Chad. So there are people, and then I want to open this up and play because I'm not going to be here for a long time. McMo will probably stream today, I'm guessing. And because I like to leave these a little short sometimes. But so there are the people who just do the standard YouTube thing. And I think they're primarily operating in information ecology, who don't treat YouTube as social media, who don't even realize YouTube is social media. I was just having this conversation with some local friends in my estuary here, and a local buddy, Zach, shout out Zach, who is more in the Vervaeke side of, and the TLC I don't think is real. The TLC is really around PBK. I think the TLC of your own understanding, or the Jordan Peterson sphere. Okay, I don't have a monopoly on the name. That's what I call it. And but he's more in the Vervaeke sphere, and he was saying he didn't even really realize, and I don't think a lot of us did until this thing happened around PVK, COVID, post Jordan Peterson, Wave 1 phenomenon, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, we all started watching PVK. We all reached out to PVK. We all started having conversations with PVK. And that Cassidy, I didn't list Cassidy. She's one of my favorites. She just made a video about how she's taking some time off. You know, she's going to do a little silencio from TLC for a while. She's about to have her baby. That's probably part of it. Who knows? But she made a video about that last night that I watched. So we all reached out to PBK. We all started talking amongst ourselves, Zooming. And this thing happened, and we all started having conversations. We want to interact in the comments. So a lot of us are recording, doing randos, writing in the comments, interacting with each other. YouTube became a social media thing, and it became what's the term? Like a hyperlinked. Because if you can hyperlink with your timestamps and all that, it's this crazy network web of information and connections and hyperlinks and clips and whatever. But it's also people getting to know each other. And there's a lot of people who I think watch PVK mainly for his monologues, mainly for his Jordan Peterson culture war stuff or political commentary or cultural commentary. But that's all really information that's in the information world. And they don't there's a lot of people who've maybe never seen a randos video. But I would say if you don't watch the randos videos, if you don't understand the randos, you don't understand what TLC is at all. You can't. If you don't know what the randos are, you can't understand TLC. I will just say that because you haven't been initiated in the relational initiation of TLC. That's what it is. You don't get it. And so there's all these people that watch PBK who, like, to me, do not really understand the heart of what's going on around the TLC of your own understanding and PBK. I definitely did, Chad. You are one of the first. I said you're one of the first people. I guarantee it's you and Grizz. Like, I would bet. I don't really bet, but I would bet $20 that if they took a poll of all PBK's watchers, the two people that he knows in the flotilla, they probably wouldn't even know what the flotilla is, but the two people they know of are you and Grim. And so I don't know. There are hierarchies, and so there are people who just watch who don't get the randos, and then there are people who like watch some of the randos, but then they remain lurkers. So like that's I should have brought paper. I would say so. Like there are the people who, in the larger Jordan Peterson sphere, let's say that there are people in the Jordan Peterson sphere who have probably heard of Peugeot. Is Peugeot the most well-known? Does he have the most subs? Somebody tell me. Outside of Jordan Peterson, who has the most YouTube subs? Let's look. We're looking it up. Live data research. Okay, Jordan B. Why does in my thing Jordan B. Cooper comes up before Jordan Peterson? He has 8.71 million subs. Chad is my favorite. William, someone with a wrench boot William. Can't say that on my stream. How dare you? Oh, it's Symbolic World, isn't it? That's the way to find it. Symbolic World. So, oh, okay. So Peugeot just has 266,000 subs. So like this is all quantitative, right? I mean, I'm just giving you the amount of subs. And Vervaeke has 122,000. So like those three, I mean, it's easily Jordan Peterson. Then it's probably if you've maybe heard of Peugeot, Vervaeke, and then PBK has what, like 34, 35, something like that. 1,000. But then like PBK has said, and I find these conversations really interesting. I don't know that much about it. PBK knows more about it because he's more of a tech dork, and Sam knows more about it, about like the numbers and the clicks and how it works and what metrics in YouTube really matter for participation. And like I've said many times before, I pay attention. I mean, the only things, because I don't go into this stuff that deep, and so I don't I have no idea what really matters. What matters to me, I guess. What matters to me. It's an old 90s country song. Who sings that? What matters to me. Don't know what to say. Don't know what to do. Don't know if it really even matters to you. How can I make you see? It matters to me. What matters to me is this kind of stuff. Oh, digital notes, you're telling me. It's the views to subs ratio that matters. Okay. See, like this is it's not Tim McGraw who sings that. It's a girl. Is it Faith Hill? Could be Faith Hill, though. No, you are not right. Slip token is what really matters. Okay. Yeah. So what matters to me are active viewers, participation, relational knowing is what matters to me. So people who watch and who comment either after the video's done or live, who are engaging with me, people I can make friendships with. Neil was like, I would say Neil was the second wave of the realization in the TLC of your own understanding that what this was about was making friends. I think that's the heart of the TLC, because that's the randos thing. Like the randos was the beginning of the relational knowing thing. It was implicit. I don't know that we explicitly knew it. Sorry. I started intellectually talking about it a lot with relational ontology, personalism. Peugeot talks about initiation. And then Neil came in and said, like, I'm here to make friends. And I think most people that watch PBK have no idea about this. And PBK says that. You know, there are levels to it. This is the TLC is about hanging out, making friends. You get excited when your friends show up, that kind of thing. And so there's the Jordan Peterson, Peugeot, Vervaeke, PVK, and then you get a narrower sub range of people that even know about the randos, that watch the randos. And then there are the people who know about the randos, who watch the randos, who participate, who comment, who've broken the fourth wall in text. There's those people. Anselman is probably the greatest. William's up there too, but William kind of broke the fourth wall in the radio series with Mark D. Parker, because he's made a video. So that's a randos. You know, essentially it just wasn't video, which is, you know, everybody has their boundaries, which is fine. I'm not judging your boundaries. And then there are the people who break the screen and participate and have had their own randos, but for whatever reason, either preference or time constraints or life or what they value, they don't actively participate as much. And then there's the people who participate a lot, who have broken the fourth wall, who come on to videos on other people's streams. Then there's the people who do all of that and make their own content, you know, like me, but I don't actively engage in streams a ton because I just don't have the time or the energy to do it. That's why I do my own. But I watch a lot passively when I'm doing other things. And then I comment, and I do lots of comment in the text, but then I do this. So there's so many different levels of this thing. And I would say to me, you don't understand the heart of the TLC until you're engaging. And it's not just live streams. I mean, some of it to give the Tungies and the Marchers and who else is always in voice chats in the Discord. Although that's moved. Like, I don't even think that happens in Bridges of Meaning anymore. That happens more in like Grim Grizz's Discord or in other Discords. But I'm just not a big Discord person either. So this started with PVK, TLC, as far as I'm concerned, and then the randos. And and YouTube is the main platform, although that moves a little bit. Okay, that's mainly what I had to say. I'm gonna post the link so that we can play a little bit. I'm gonna Nathan, have you ever come onto one of my streams? I know you're in the House of Woo a lot. My streams. Oh, there it was. And let's see, pinning. And then, and all the different, I'm going to look at some comments. Yeah, buddy. I goaded you into it.
So you're talking smack about me.
No, I wasn't. So I actually want to get your take on this because I feel like you've been around a long time in the TLC, and then you've been banned, you've come back.
Well, I'm still banned from the Discord. Just I won't ever be let in, but yeah,
you're right. but you've come back in specifically. Like, I've seen a lot more of your engagement in the House of Woo. What has been your experience of the TLC, of your own understanding, and what do you think about it now?
I think I've thought about a lot of different things about it at different times.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like initially getting into like Christianity and Jordan Peterson on that like initial wave,
right?
What I found interesting about Paul is because he's a Christian pastor, so he's discussing Christian theology not from the outside but from the inside, right? So that's what I think appealed to me about what he has to say, not necessarily his political takes or philosophical takes, but the exposition of Christianity and Jesus' message from inside that system rather than outside it. And I think that even today, that's where I still get value. Like, I often get very put off by some of the more like political or culture war takes, things like that. But then occasionally, Paul will be talking about like, something in the Gospels or whatever, and I'll be like, that's great, like I really resonate with that. But then he'll weave it into like a culture war thing. I'll be like,
yeah, because I mean, being British, and also you are a lot more, I would say, I mean, and people say this, I think the TLC is more diverse than this, obviously, because there's people like me and Nate and the Grail Countryside is more like Christian anarchists, a lot harder to pin down. They're definitely not like American political conservatives at all. And so it makes it a little bit more nuanced, but by far, I mean, because it's mainly American Christians, and evangelical and Protestant, because that's all kind of part of the whole shtick, they're going to be politically culture war conservative more so, which makes it weird for people like you. Yeah.
It's, I guess what maybe upsets me or frustrates me about it is that I think that there's a few just blind spots around these things. And that's kind of like what I see is, I think one of the blind spots is not acknowledging the relationship between religious expression and politics, because as long as your religious expression, so talking about all the participatory stuff, right, where people are saying, well, what religion is to participate, to embody, to enact, right, all these things. Well, if your view of politics is that politics is about how we socially organize, conduct ourselves, shape ourselves socially based on our values, well, then that is the exact same thing as embodiment, and it's the exact same thing as religious organization. And I think that sometimes people with maybe a more evangelical or American theological understanding try to drive a wedge between the two, obviously because of the statements that Jesus makes about, my kingdom's not of this world, and in the world. Right. But I think that you have to make sense of those things in terms of an eschatological message. But in terms of your participation in the world and your participation in religion, I think that is political, because it's about expressing your values and living. And I think that driving that wedge between the two creates this blind spot where often it becomes very easy not to disambiguate between maybe more neutral. Oh, I've got to do the thing Andrew Wilson couldn't do. I'm going to open a jar. My girlfriend gave me a jar. You got to.
She could have used that little like rubber thing I was showing earlier. It's very
Someone's greased it up for me. I think you've got to be like cognizant of that, right? And I think that what I often see is that people are not as cognizant of that, and so they bring in a lot of like political claims, but then they try and sort of like frame it as if that's like neutral, like as if like that's like a neutral reading of theology or something. And I think that's what kind of frustrates me.
I think so. For me, the nuance that I would add to that, because I think your point is legitimate, and all of those things that frustrate you, I think I've grown up my whole life, the similar things have frustrated me. But part of that is because the nuance that I would add to it is that being, and of course, it's always what you mean by these things, because it's the God of your own understanding, it's the TLC of your own understanding, it's the politics of your own understanding, is someone who identifies as like essentially a Christian anarchist, or believes in like the political structure of much more along like an anarcho-socialist, is I don't believe in a politics of scale, because I believe in personalism and knowing people and Dunbar numbers, and that when you get into a politics of scale, which is what most modern state politic is, you get into the problems of like what Paul Kingsnorth talks about with the machine and institutional collapse. This is why I say all institutions are inherently demonic. And so I agree with you that this is where I distinguish between politics and religion a little bit, is religion, and this isn't industrial institutional religion, most fundamentally is like religio, what binds, what holds you together. It's the unity of multiplicity. But most people automatically conflate that with their experience of industrial institutional religion, which to me, like there's obviously overlap between those things, but I have distinctions in my mind between those things.
Right. So I reckon in terms of what you're saying, maybe this is how I'm interpreting what you're saying, is like there is a difference that you think is important between like corporate religion may be understood through certain denominations.
Yes.
And between certain organized forms of politics, like like a constitutional democracy with a party system where two parties don't, like that is also a corporate structure that playing certain games and things. And what you're saying, the paradigm, I take you to be saying the paradigm that makes more sense to you is to sort of not try and think in terms of those sorts of corporate structures, but think on a more individual level about the your personal values and the relationships to real people in your life, and how that is framed in terms of narrative stories and things like that, right?
Yeah, I think that's fundamentally what's most meaningful, and it's probably what can only be meaningful.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with this, right? I think though, I wouldn't say it's not political still. Like I think it is still political, and because, for example, you're going to have some claims in there, I think, about, say, well, I live in a world that is structured like this, so how do I appreciate and understand that or coexist with it? Or if I want the world to move in a different direction, I'm going to encourage myself and people who live around me to live in a particular kind of way that moves it away from a structure that is being bad. So insofar as like those things are a part of it, I would still say like it's political because it's about but it's just a different kind of politics, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason that I think it's important to acknowledge the political aspect of it is because then it makes the disagreements with people who are arguing for like a different vision of reality maybe more clear between what like your view is and how that differs from maybe the view of someone who's, like a neoliberal sort of, or a neoconservative or something, and they have a particular vision of Christianity as like a different type of corporate structure to you. And you can then clarify and say, well, here's where the values maybe are similar about some things and different on other things, and how my picture is different from yours.
Right. So the one thing I would add to that, and then I want to go back to your experience of TLC, is it's like I would say it's the conversation we're having about politics is almost identical to like atheist, theist, non-theist conversations about God. It's like it's the exact same thing. It's just like, what are we actually talking about? And so I acknowledge, like, in the classic sense of politic and what it means, yeah, for sure, that's very true. But like when most people talk about politics, they're talking about the politics of the machine, I think. And it's something that I have people can disagree with me. We can obviously have conversations about this, but I think everyone would be so much better if everyone paid less attention to it, because it's almost like a egregore. You know what I'm talking about? Like the more attention you give it, the worse it is. And if people did things that were so much more like Willie Nelson's son is a musician. He has this song of like, what does he say? He's essentially like, turn off the screens, stop debating things, go plant a garden, something like that. Like that's the kind of stuff or go exercise or, hang out with your family. Like if people were doing that kind of stuff so much more, I think as the saying goes, things would just come out in the wash,
I do agree with you in terms of like the values you're expressing, and like the badness of the industrial sort of like political system, as you call it. I think that it's still important. Maybe it's about like deconstructing people who are in that paradigm or something, just to be clear about what's being said politically, so you can get people to kind of like break out of that frame. But then maybe there's people who come at it from a different angle, like, maybe there's people who come at it, as you're saying, through the angle of just experiencing these communities or something, and their worldview shapes and changes over a bunch of different ways rather than. But I think there are some people as well for which this kind of like framing of going, oh yeah, my sort of like view of politics was set in this little box, but there's actually this broader box that I can kind of like think in.
Yeah.
I think that for some people as well, that will be fruitful to sort of breaking them out of that and deconstructing things. And just one thing in terms of what you're saying, I don't know if you know of it, the Catholic worker movement. You might be interested in that. That's like a Christian anarchist thing founded by some woman called Dorothy Day, and very similar to some of the things you're saying about just having these like houses of local communities that are about self-organizing because the politics of the world is corrupt, and just trying to live out Jesus's kind of commandments in the actual world.
Yeah. Isn't there a broader philosophical term that Catholics have for that? Whatever. No, I agree. I've heard of it a little bit, but I've only learned about Catholicism since becoming Orthodox a lot more, because growing up evangelical Protestant, you're indoctrinated pretty hard against Catholicism and anything having to do with Catholicism. But so yeah, back to your experience of TLC. So the political thing has obviously been one of your turnoffs, but like you are someone who's had, quite the arc, you've had a quite narrative. Your narratival arc within TLC has been interesting because you were my impression. Here, let's just do this. I'll give you my impression of you in not knowing you that much and seeing you peripherally. So you came in, like you were saying, you were kind of like a white hot, zealous Christian convert, I thought, young, zealous dude. And you came to PVK for a lot of the Christian commentary. And then you kind of went through because you're pretty sharp and you read a lot, you went through a pretty quick deconstruction and then went kind of like atheist agnostic for a long time. And I don't even know where you're at now. But like somewhere within there, Joey and you had the problem where I think in a live stream you were making comments that he didn't like, and somehow, whatever, you got banned in the Discord, and then you were shunned, and then you weren't really participating for a long time. But you would pop in here and there, and I don't know how much you were watching or keeping up with PVK or observing or any other TLC stuff. And then recently, I mean, this is over the span of like what, 5 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then recently you come back in with Mark. So
maybe even like 7 years, thinking of it. Because it was like, what, 2019, 2018?
Yeah. Because what I remember with you is like you came into some live stream and I was in the comments and I said something like, it's deeper than ideas, man, which was like, and whatever, we could extrapolate the nuance of that whole conversation, which, I mean, there's a lot in it of like what's Plato and ideas and what's really going on with all that. I get it. But I was trying to get at the relational thing. And then I popped on one of your live streams at one point, but I would say we have never developed a kind of rapport like I have with many other people where we're just like hanging out, doing this thing. And do you have other communities where you feel like, well, I don't know. There's too many questions. I guess let's go back and you just respond to why you maybe came on Mark's stream and how much you've participated and how that experience has been from your side.
Yeah, I think Mark just invited me to do an interview. That's mainly why. And he's always been like very nice to me. I don't know, like, he's not. I think a problem that some people have with me in particular is that. And this is, I think, something that when I see it, I like to push on because I think there's growth in this area. Is when people have very like sectarian beliefs.
Yeah.
And often those sectarian beliefs can be enforced through things like thought terminating cliches, moral shaming, stuff like that. I like to then push on the tensions in those things because I think there's a danger in people thinking that way, basically. And so when people try to say use technologies like shaming, guilting, like basically emotional manipulation, bullying, things like that. I love to undermine and subvert those things by like just knowing more than people, being smarter than them, stuff like that. I know it sounds douchey and it is douchey, but I kind of think that it's a necessary evil in some sense because it's one of the only things that will help some of these people to like break out of that framework and mold. Now, I'm not saying that happened, by the way, and I think a different thing was happening in the interactions like 5 or so years ago in TLC, where I was where at that point, because I was deconverting from like a high control sort of religious framework, and I was beginning to explore analytic philosophy and felt it was giving me some clarity on things. I have disagreements with that now, but I think within that framework, I was like looking at the way that people were kind of muddying what I saw as muddying the waters in some of these spaces. And I just find it very frustrating and upsetting because I wanted them to be like clear and I wanted them to give good like philosophical answers to questions rather than muddying those waters and things.
Quick interruption. So like this thing, I don't know what he means by this, but it could be like this kind of thing. Like, I don't know if this is like a violin, like because you're playing your sad song. Because what I want to say, I don't know if that's what he's doing. I have no idea. But it just came into my mind as an example as you were talking about it. Because what I like about you a lot, and the corner is full of contrarians, is that because what you just said, I'm almost the exact same way. Like if I see a problem, I'm very contrarian, and I will lean into differences and problems, but hopefully in a relational way because that's, I don't know, I'm very, my personality, for whatever reason, that's a habit that I have. And you need to have some balance with it. You're just particularly good at it because you have a like whip smart, analytical, kind of left-brained mind, like you're much better at that than I am. Like I'll just grant you that, no problem. But what I was thinking as you were saying, and I want you to keep rolling, is that was happening in the TLC and still happens all the time in the TLC. But I think, to use one of my Rob Bellisms, the thing behind the thing behind the thing is like that will happen, but there's like a deeper relational solidarity that's implicit underneath that. So like those things are happening and we can criticize that, but I think there's more of I think we actually have a community of trust built in where some of those things can happen. And I think to your point, there's areas where I think we can really improve in that regard. Because I mean, I hate that kind of in talk is going to be inevitable because that's what happens in communities. Yeah. But kind of the group think, and especially kind of the cultural shaming, it's what I call a hyper conservative impulse that isn't just within self-identifying conservatives to protect the tribe. And I'm just like the fact that people nowadays, it's like this Bill Clinton quote. I don't normally tell people who it says, but like the last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. To be afraid of people who have different ideas than you is a very real thing in the modern world, and it makes no fucking sense to me.
My view is that it's not only an American thing, but I think it's very present in American like theologies for some reason. And maybe an analysis of that would incorporate a whole bunch of things, right? It's not going to be simple. Some of the things I see are things like, just kind of like sectarianism in group, in the group, out the group. Maybe some of it's connected to certain views of salvation or the Holy Spirit and things like that, where the act of being saved is very connected to a particularly strict sort of set of sentences someone says within a particular church community. And then what you've got is people deconstructing from some of those theologies, but bringing with them some of these background values and views that are quite sectarian.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think also it could come from a sense of like almost intellectual insecurity, where because some people have come from these more fundamentalist theological backgrounds and they've deconstructed some of that but remained Christian, there's like a fear of like intellectual disagreement and of deconstructing again, or of because, and this is where even I view sometimes it's because people's view of God and Jesus is quite narrow.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is like as if like their understanding of God isn't big enough to handle like all of the pluralistic information in the world and different ways people have existed, or their view of Jesus is this very narrow type of salvation or something that just isn't a big enough vision to incorporate all the different ways of being a human there are in the world and stuff. And so it leads to this very scared theology, I think. And then the reaction out of that fear is this is how I understand it, is like this sectarianism, like oh, you're disagreeing, well, you don't know the metaphysical fact I know of the metaphysics, like and it's like, and it's all just like a defense mechanism for this kind of fear that doesn't allow people to just be like people with people, because they've got to get on script of some like metaphysical dialogue that makes them feel safe or something.
Right. Well, it's either, so like what you were just talking about made me think of and this isn't to throw shade at my own mother, and I love my mother very much, but it's like, because we've had these conversations, because I have always been, I've been through a lot of different church experiences. I've read books from, on lists that you're not supposed to read during all of that. And I often have wanted to have these conversations with my mom because she's the most interested in religious intellectual conversations in my family. And we got to the point where we don't really discuss this stuff anymore. We're maybe starting to a little bit, but part of that's just, I think both of us have matured in ways. But it got to the point where at one point she told me, she said, "What's with the glare?" Because I'm talking about meme. Oh, my daughter is just coming in the room and she just gave me a strong side eye. But my mother said, like, she said, "I don't want to talk to you." Can't even remember the subject. It's probably universalism or something. But she said, "I don't want to talk to you about this because I'm afraid I won't be able to explain or think about why you're wrong, and so I just don't even want to engage it. And I was like, well, to me, it was disheartening at the time, but I think it was also a step towards our growth and our reconciliation because truly, like, that was really honest on her part, I think, which is good. That's a step. It's not because there's also the danger, I think, which maybe, I don't know, maybe you're prone to, because you're particularly good at it, of like, I think I don't want to be anti-intellectual, but you can also emphasize the value of the intellect, and I often say, like, the intellect isn't a virtue. Being smart isn't a virtue.
Well, just on this point, though,
Yeah.
I actually think that this is one of the biggest misunderstandings that a lot of people in this space have of me. Like, so I think because of the fact that I use these tools to deconstruct some of the things that people are doing, they assume that that is my approach to reality and how I think about these things. But my view is completely anti-philosophy, right? Like I'm
Ramping down philosophy by philosophy.
Yeah, I'm deeply critical of these intellectual projects people have. I think they're empty and do nothing. It's all about, for me, showing people the emptiness of what they're trying to do with their analytic systems and bringing them back to ordinary life after they can see that. And that is one of the things that I think upsets me about some of these like criticisms that I'm sometimes getting of like, oh, well, you're overly analytical, you're being too left brain. I'm like, no, you don't realize I'm trying to show you, like, I'm trying to show you that the conclusions of these sort of like metaphysical systems and how empty they are, so you can stand there and go, oh yeah, that was all just nothing, and I already knew everything I needed to know about philosophy just by living and existing. And now the question is just, how do I actually just live my life with all these concepts that I have?
That's really good. You've maybe never said anything I agree with more, and it's very Ecclesiastes. It's very like Proverbs too. I think there's nothing. I mean, that's the way I often think about it. And this is very in line with personalism. Is like different people are going to need different things because people are different, and so like you might have to go all the way down the path of the intellect to realize there's no ground there, and then come back into just like a more, because the whole point, really, even from within the Christian intellectual tradition, the greatest is love. The whole point is love of all these things. And so, but I very much agree with you. I mean, not like I can apologize for the TLC because it's a broad human impulse, but when it's something we need to get better at. I will say, as the TLC, when there's someone who's very smart, who isn't within your camp or your tribe or on your side, whether like within the TLC group, so like relationally tribally or intellectually tribally or whatever, who's really smart, I think I want to be able to engage people like that well, or like whatever gift. I don't know what other gift it could be. Charismatic. People do that with me, I suppose, because people think I'm charismatic. And so they're like, we don't want a cult of charisma. And I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm just being who I'm being. Like, charisma isn't bad.
I think there are vices in all of these things, but it's like, are you recognizing the boundaries on those vices like in an appropriate way, or even in like this is where I say there's like kind of an asymmetry in some of these things, where some people, for example, will dismiss me on the basis of like being too analytic and philosophical, but then when it comes to the view that they agree with or prefer, they're more than happy for people to be analytic, and
Exactly.
it's like double standards and things.
Totally.
You just want to have consistent sort of boundaries on where is too far and where isn't, kind of thing.
And to me, this is, so my friend Kalia Rivet, who came into the corner actually through Randos United and Universalism discussions, who's like a brilliant analytical mind. He'll say this often, but he'll be like, mystery for me, but not for thee. When people within different Christian traditions want to punt to mystery, and they'll be like, so when the other people do it, not cool. When I do it, though, it's totally cool. And that's almost my criticism of what I call within Christian traditions, in my experience, the faux intellectuals. Because there are people, most of the churches I've been at and pastors and things, I've gone to like what are what I would categorize as Calvinist, Reformed, at least soteriologically. So like doctrines of grace, like their understanding of the atonement is Reformed essentially, and they're very Protestant, sola scriptura, and they think of themselves as being intellectually rigorous. Like that's one of their markers of identity. But I've always called them faux intellectuals, because I'm like, you go to a certain point, and then you start doing these mind game tactics of where
Yeah, they
like,
need to rig the board in order
yes,
to win it. Like that's what
yeah,
I find with a lot of the like pre-suppy type people as well, is like, you know, they start off very well with all these big words and references to what Christian thinkers have thought, but then when you get down to like what they're actually saying, they just start kind of rigging the game. They're like, oh well, I can beg the question because it's a virtuous circle, but it's a vicious circle if you do it. And it's like, oh, I see. This is just, you know, I've got to play with my mouth shut and my hands tied behind my back, and you know, you can just say whatever you want. Apparently, is like the game here.
right,
It's not a
right.
fair discussion or something.
So then within a Christian ethic, and maybe if nobody else is going to show up, but I want to close this in about 10 minutes because my daughter's awake and I got to do other stuff. I got to go for a run. But thank you for coming on. Number one, this has been lovely. I appreciate you in the corner a lot, but I also, so this is my question, but also I try to put my money where my mouth is and lead by example in this. How do we include the people with whom we disagree? Like even in this instance, even the people that ostracize and use these shady tactics and do all those things, how can I try to do this, show hospitality to those kinds of people, because I want to be, to me, this is like the Ian McGilchrist relational, practical non-duality that includes duality. We can make the distinctions, fine, but not to get caught in the zero-sum either-or of the distinction.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got like amazing practical advice here, because there's a lot of things that you know, different people are trying to do and achieve right through the TLC, and so some things are going to be in conflict with that, some things aren't. I do think maybe the core concern to me of some people seems to be, it's like, you know, what Pete Enns calls like the sin of certainty still, but maybe just in a different guise than sort of like traditional evangelical fundamentalism, which is like some people are very afraid of the idea they might be wrong, and so they just can't kind of like tolerate a certain type of disagreement about certain things.
Yeah.
That's maybe the biggest issue that I have. For other people, there are like what I would call like more legitimate concerns, right? Which would be things like people being upset with ways I've conducted myself, or and so could conduct myself again. And I think that, you know, like those are reasonable. I completely get it. You know, my view is obviously going to be biased on this, but I would say, I would say that I think if you were to evaluate these instances, you'd find it's kind of like a, you know, a moat splinter eye sort of thing going on, where it's like,
Yeah.
what is Nathan reacting this way in like a complete vacuum, or are there like, you know, is it possible to make sense of why he might be acting in a certain way? Not to, and that's not to completely like morally absolve myself of wrong things that I do and have done. Like absolutely, you know, there's room for improvement. But I think maybe the thing to ask is, who is open to admitting that they may be wrong and is trying to reflect and improve on those things, and who is victoriously, you know, shouting the other side down as being evil and not holding up any kind of mirror. And when I say side, I don't mean like group as a whole. I just mean like people involved in certain interactions and things. So there's no like general advice there about how to deal with these sorts of situations, but I think that people can look at these things through those lenses.
Right. And this is original to you, the moat splinter thing, right? That's your original thing? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So I was like, for a second you had me.
So but with that, this is an area where I would just challenge, I would say, self-identifying Christians in being hypocritical. If you hold the other to a standard that you're not even holding, exactly what Chris was saying, humility. It's like C.S. Lewis said this. See, these are the things. We'll quote, this is why I call it like your egoic intellect, or in your conscious mind. or you say these kinds of platitudes, is we'll quote something like C.S. Lewis. I think C.S. Lewis said this, where like humility isn't a virtue, but without it, there can be no virtue. Something like, which I don't know if that's actually true, but I get his sentiment. It's probably true. I mean, Lewis was, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't understand how it's not a virtue, but whatever. Humility is key for the Christian, and also like self-sacrifice, kenosis, you just loving your enemy. I wish I were accursed for the sake of my brethren. Like, I think when St. Paul said that, he was serious. And I think if Christians aren't going to lead with in their own lives and modeling by what it looks like to reconcile with your enemy, I don't know what your Christianity is. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of this in my reading of like Jesus's engagements with the Pharisees. Hey, Sandy, sorry if you want to talk.
Morning, Luke, sorry.
No, you're good. I'll mute you for a second, and then we'll maybe give you like the last word. You can come in because I'm going to shut it down relatively soon. Okay, go, Nathan. Yeah.
Just to say, I think I read a lot of this into like Jesus' engagement with the Pharisees, right? Because the moral lessons I get out of those like stories and parables and things is typically, that the Pharisees are very extrinsically religious, that they say the right things, they concern over theological doctrines, appearances, things like that. And now I don't think Jesus' message is like, therefore don't participate in organized religion or anything like that. But I think these points of like majoring on the minors and minoring on the majors is the big kind of like part of that message. And he says what when he says these statements like you cross land and sea to make a single proselyte, and then he's twice the child of hell as yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I see that with a lot of very these sorts of phrases that you're saying. Like, people will pick up these phrases like, well, at least thank God that I'm a sinner, or at least I got but they say these things as sort of like pacifiers, so they don't have to take moral responsibility anymore for like bad actions, or hold a mirror up to their actions and things. I'm like, look, those theological statements, it's not that I think that they are right and true theological statements, but the correct use of them is not to use them to avoid morally correcting yourself. And I think if you're doing that, you're doing the exact same sort of thing as what the Pharisees are doing, by thank God that I'm not like that tax collector sort of thing, right? So yeah, I think that the core of, or one of the cores of the moral message there is that even if the label is Christian, if the symbol is a cross, and the word is Jesus, you can still actually be using those things in a negative way if you're not constantly trying to reform your heart and life and hold up that moral mirror. So
yeah, absolutely. Sandy.
Hey, Luke.
Hey.
Interesting conversation. So when you're talking about things like humility, or when it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're reflecting on, I jumped in the middle and I was listening to talk about getting kicked out of different spaces, people's behavior. What, I guess, what are the criteria for people getting kicked out, even wanting to come back, things like that. But intersecting that is also this running theme of Christianity in general. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do you know if you're being genuine or ingenuous? And I'm curious, like, I'm hearing, if you had to sum up, what would be your best for something like this? I was actually sitting, Luke, and imagining, because I saw somebody post about Nathan doing streaming a voice chat, which is a huge I mean, that's, I don't know, it almost hits me like sticking a camera in the girls' washroom kind of thing. Sorry, but it does. So I'm kind of and so I started to imagine, what if YouTube gave you the ability to see who's in your chat, and you could just hit a button and choose who you wanted to subject to your comments and your thoughts, and not, I mean, I could say invite into your live stream, but it's not really an invite. It's more of an imposition isn't a good word either. I'm not sure what to call it. But so I started wondering about that. Like we're going places that we aren't going to have seen before. What are the powers that are going to be given to us? And what are we going to do with those? And how, and are we even reflecting on it now? Kind of thing.
Okay, let me, I got feedback. I'm gonna mute. I think so.
Oops, sorry.
No, we both did it at the same time. So I think, I mean, part of your question, I think, was about boundaries and essentially when excommunication of any group. I mean, you think about that obviously in church, but I think broadly, like my broad general category is everything is their bodies, their corporate bodies, physical bodies, spiritual bodies, and there's in and out. And so you're going to have excommunication. That's just inevitable. As like a universalist, I would say all exclusion is for future inclusion. But what I would say is when and where groups do that, either in Christianity or out or in particular churches or whatever, it's going to vary. I don't think you can prescribe it as some universal thing. I think it should be, my preference is that it's behavioral, that it's showing the head in conjunction, as the authority over the body, should establish explicit boundaries of behavioral laws that then are discerned, spiritually discerned. And then when someone consistently breaks those cultural norms within that body, I think then they're excommunicated. I mean, I think that's just how it works. And that's just how bodies work inevitably. And hopefully that's done with a wise, discerning authority. But beyond that, I don't think there's any sort of prescription. And then your other point about live streaming and powers that are given to us, I don't know that I really understand what you were talking about. Maybe you can clarify that.
I think you're muted, Sandy.
I did her. Sorry. She muted herself. Now I can't unmute it.
Sorry, that's because we have apparently our fingers are in sync. We both hit the button at the same time again. Yeah. Well, jumping off of what you said. So, because I've also been thinking about excommunications, like my denominational background has been going through a crap load of interesting stuff the last few years. But I was going to say, like, what do we do? Like, if there's an excommunication, what do we do after that? And who does it? And how do we do it? Like, Nathan, Luke mentioned you jumping back into TLC through Mark, but I thought I saw you like a year or so ago with talking to CW. And he and I had talked because we were both just checking out StreamYard and stuff. And he had mentioned that he wanted to talk to you. And so I'm kind of like, are those two connections vital to you jumping back in, or were you already sort of back in the lurker mode deciding what to do? Or like, how do these things work after the fact? That kind of comes out of what I was and I will just answer Luke's question for a second of no, I was literally thinking of times and timing, and we're all different people. Somebody commented about intellectuals in the chat, and I said intellectual is difficult because my ex-husband was also very left-brained and had a hard time dealing with some of the right brain aspects of sorry, he died last year, so I'm deciding what to I've talked about him a lot, but like when anything disconnects us from something, there are ripples and repercussions. So either in that event, we kind of get pushed so far out or decide to move so far out that we just find another pool to swim in, or we stay and something happens. And I'm curious about who decides what happens. And like, if I mentioned a few times to my ex about, you know, like following Paul, and there is no way he would jump into a conversation here. But what if I had the power to push a button because I saw him in a comment and force him to? That was my question. That's part of what we're discussing, but it's also outside of what we're discussing. It's a power that we might actually gain at some point, and that'll have huge repercussions, and, you know, there again, a lot of ripples. I'm just kind of curious about that aspect as well. What if we could? Like, would you do it? Like, there's comments, you post a comment, but would you do it? Like, and it's going to go well, or it's going to go difficultly. And there's still people. And like, for me, I left my ex in 2016. My son's group home asked me to jump back into sort of navigating the middle ground, because my ex couldn't drive anymore and our son couldn't drive. Jumping back in is difficult, and it bears some responsibility on both sides. And I know for a fact that it can go really ugly and very difficult, and it can have impact on people that are outside of anybody's control. And then what? I've had a number of those moments just in normal life, let alone on stream life. And I'm kind of like, so what comes next? Like, what's next?
All right, I'm going to say something, and then I want to I'll let you mute. Oh, there we go. There we got it. I'll say something, and then I'll give Nathan the last word, because I really do got to close. We're going to probably be about 10 minutes over. But I do like part of your question. It made me think of the Flaming Lips song, the Yeah, Yeah, Yeah song. Like, what would you do with all that power? It's a great song. Just listen to the lyrics, and it's great. But there's all sorts of, like, I often think of Peterson's culturally enforced monogamy. There are explicit forces, you know, that come out and try to coerce either directly, explicitly, or violently. And then there are subtle, implicit forces that try to get people to do all sorts of things. And I think a wise leader or leaders or head, to use my framing, needs to be cognizant of all those things. And I don't know what's going on with all the streaming stuff, but Nathan, I'll let you respond and close out.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what to say, but I think I don't know if it's worth. It seems almost like too much like propaganda or PR or something for me to almost just have a voice on a stage, right? To communicate my side of that event in particular as being referred to. But maybe I'll try to do it in a way that isn't like too polemical, which is that in that situation, I think that my streaming it was wrong. I absolutely agree with that, actually. And I even said so at the time. What I believe I was doing is pointing out a type of hypocrisy there, where people were very willing to behave in an abusive way in a kind of like private voice chat server where people are where people know that there's a kind of like hegemonic viewpoint. They're not willing to give people a kind of like fair rule set with which to not be over talked or muted and things like that, right? And so I feel that there's a power dynamic there where some people are behaving very negatively. And I think that what my act did and does is firstly kind of expose that to some differing points of views, because this is exactly how I think all abusive communities work. Now, this is not me saying that the TLC broadly is abusive. I don't think it is, but I think that people can get into cliques where they operate in this way. And I think that the only way for those power dynamics to be broken up is for broader communities to look at those dynamics and go, no, like our assessment of that is not what you are all saying. That's kind of ostracizing or harming this person in a particular way. And I'm just someone who's fortunate enough to have a platform that I can do that sort of thing. Like, you know, that there's probably a lot of people who have either done that and then just decided this isn't a space for me to talk, or have been browbeaten into having to just conform into a particular point of view and assimilate.
So are you pointing at an evening out throughout all the, because there's a whole bunch of different communities, and in a sense, each one of us, like in each of the different StreamYards, each of the different things are a clique, if you want to call it that. But I know, like, when I watch people in different Discords jumping into voice chats and things to talk, you know, it's like you take a big city and there's a multitude of little communities within the city. Are we evening out so there is not that, or are we trying to figure out how to, you know, like, if I go to Toronto, I will, you know, I can go to like, oh shoot, what's the market they're called? It used to be like, in Toronto, there was like little groups of communities, and still now in a lot of places, there's little groups of different communities, some by culture, by country, by religion, by whatever. If our point is simply to highlight what we don't like about each of the ones that are not ours, I think we lose something. So my question was, what do we do? Like, when we are engaging with somebody, that it's not even just that we don't like them. It might just simply be that we're all searching for stable ground. You want the ground under your feet to be what you expect. And if you're talking to somebody, and because there's been in several spots where there's been upheaval because of over talking people, or getting a little too loud, or a little too defensive, or a little this or that. It's one of the things I actually love about here is all the personalities. I really do. There's some fabulous personalities, and there's a whole lot of interesting ways of expressing things. But that's me. Unless somebody, even if, and maybe this goes to 37 years of abusive marriage, even if somebody directly attacks me, I'm going to react out of that comfort zone. But I also am very aware that I have to decide what comes next. And does that come from me or someone else? So just framing it again.
I want to jump in, and I really do have to shut it down. But whatever's being talked about here, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm not familiar with it. I'll probably.
Oh, sorry, Luke.
No, it's all right.
I've had a couple of conversations in the last few days, including one with Paul on the live stream thingy, and I'm just thinking about, you know, I'm just thinking about some of the stuff that's the ways we interact and the in-out thing, and it's come up in a few places, this whole in-out topic. And
okay, what I would say, I want to do two things. When you were talking, so I don't know about the situation. I will probably end up watching that live stream, and I'll find out more things about that. But I don't want to go into it in any more detail on this stream because we don't have the time. We have to go, and because of this, I think. I mean, probably being a Christian and being raised this way, I've always thought that the model to deal with people and with conflict is Matthew 18, where if you have a problem with someone, you go to them and you say your problem to them. And then if you can't resolve it, you bring in a trusted third party. This is part of my church deconstruction issue, actually, part of it, because this happened to me, but in a manipulative, weird way. And then you bring a third party that's trusted by both. All this stuff is above board. It's not like done without one party knowing, because then it gets into shady things. That's what happened to me. And then if you can't resolve it there, you take it to the church. You take it to the entire body. I think churches, I think bodies almost never do.
Yeah, no, and I get it. I was just curious about, because like that's a great paradigm for how to deal with things in a church structure. we're in an online structure, which if you want to call it a church, we
But I
can.
would say my point.
But
my
what do
point
I
is-
do? What do you do? What does Nathan do when we're watching the dynamics? Because you have the before, the middle, and the after. What's the story? What do we like? I was just curious about. I know what I do. I was just curious what you guys do. That's
Okay,
all.
so my real last word, and then I will let Nathan close. I want to thank Nathan for coming on, because this is the first time we've gotten to talk like this, and I think we talked about a lot of great things, and I enjoyed it. My response to what Sandy just said, and truly my last word, is again, church. It's when church is just a body. A church is a body, more fundamentally, and so like anybody, this is also a body. It's just a weird emergent YouTube parasocial online nebulous spiritual body that has particularity in it. And so it's the same thing. I would say you do the same thing. You go to the person, you bring in a third party, and then ultimately, probably in terms of the TLC of your own understanding, then you take it to Paul and the whole thing is aired out if you can't get resolution at that. I think that's the biblical model. I think that's what you do. I'm not a big fan. I don't, and maybe part of this is my temperament, and then Nathan can respond. I'm not a big fan of doing things behind closed doors. I don't like it. I think that's what the first two steps are for. If you can't resolve it in the first two steps, there are no more closed doors.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly how to like close it all out. I just think it's very beneficial for people to often do, because I think, you know, when people come across things like this, they're occupying a perspective, right? Everyone's always occupying a perspective, and just to be a little bit careful about framing devices on information that you might hear, and people having, you know, invested interests in like sides of discussion. So obviously I do have that as well, right? Because like, say in this circumstance, I'm one of the people involved, and I think people should just be cautious to try and take a step back and like look at people's behaviors, rather than maybe like morally valenced language about how evil someone is or something, and kind of go, you know, who here is like acting with some kind of extended, you know, arm of grace, even if they're providing pushback on certain types of things? Who here is instigating aggression and pushing things in a worse direction, versus maybe, you know, acting in self-defense and trying to make things get to a better place? And that doesn't mean, just because I'm saying that I can't be a person who's ever in the wrong. I absolutely can, and I am to some degree, definitely in this case. But that's all I would want people to do with these sorts of things.
All right. Thank you, guys. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Sorry. But if anybody wants to tell me any more about it, I can be reached at thepersonpodcast@gmail. If Nathan, you want to tell, because I don't know what the situation is. But anyhow, thank you all for coming. It was a good conversation. And until next time, that's all. Thanks, Sandy. See you guys.